We're on. We're live. Glenn Henderson. Come on.
It's good to be here, Jim. Sometimes you need to be in lockdown, right?
That's right. Yeah, both of us need to be locked down. Yeah. Great to have you on here. For those who don't know you, tell us a little bit about your background. And then you wrote a blog recently for IOL that really caught my attention. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to get you back on here. For those who don't know you, this is Glenn Henderson. But we've been together a long time as friends, colleagues, business partners, lots of different things, traveling together. And so it's always a joy to talk to you. So give us a little bit of your background. When I met you, you were in the transportation logistics business.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting when people start talking about resumes and things, and people get excited when they hear that you had a global logistics company and you've done this and you've done that and you've done that. We've in that logistics company, we deliver things to the White House. We chartered jets. We had onboard couriers, had 15 offices, and people get real excited. You were doing business with Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 100 companies. And so been around the block quite a bit and also have had a lot of other businesses. So oftentimes people say that my wife and myself were serial entrepreneurs. So if I had to be put in any context, it might possibly be that. But what I tell them is the real resume is quite a bit different. And that is, been bankrupt twice, that's many, many years ago, and failed relationships, broken relationships, partnerships that didn't work, things that I thought was going to work one way didn't happen, a lot of disappointment. And as I laugh with you, because you have what people may not know is Dr. Jim Chambers, because he has the PhD behind his name. I don't have those alphabets, but I do. I kind of just stole the PhD, but mine's been pain, hardship, and disappointment. It was where
Right.
I've got my PhD. But in saying that, and as I'm able to smile through all those things, it is those things that really have made me who I am today, going through those things. And quite frankly, and that was what the whole context when we talk about Win with Glenn, and then as I've been working with IOL, the Institute of Organizational Leadership is IOL for people who don't know, in the context of success, is when I look back, and even during those times, I realized that it was less of what I was trying to attain and more of what one and the things that I was going through that really was most edifying. And that's what people really talk more about. They want to hear more about, tell us, Glenn, what you went through. How did you get through that? And more of, what was the so-called final, as if there is a final outcome. And so that was the essence of the blog that I put together on success.
Yeah, the blog, I thought it was great because it touches on two things that I wanted to get you on here and talk about. So the first one, now, for those of you listening, both of these things, nothing here is going to be, earth shattering. Oh, brand new. I never heard that before. I think what most people are going to say is, yeah, I've heard this my whole life, especially if you're in business or ministry or you're in some kind of professional, capacity. You've heard both of these things multiple times. The question is, have you really internalized them? Have you lived through them, etc.? And that's what caught my attention because, like you, success can be defined in all these different ways. People look at your life and think, oh, wow, that guy had a charmed existence or whatever, and nothing could be further from the truth. The whole doctorate thing, that's 8 years of my life, 8 long, tedious, brain breaking, mind numbing, nearly cost me everything I owned, including my marriage and everything else. So I think these things for me are extremely important. So let me bring up the first one. So number one is you talk about success being not so much a destination, a place to arrive at, but it's a journey. And I know in AFC Worldwide Express, your company, when I met you and the other companies that I know you've had, it's not about the end game of, hey, we arrived, we're now here, we have this many staff, this much, you know, annual income and so on. But it's a journey. One of the things you said in here, if you just focus on the journey, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm not trying to quote you, but I'm paraphrasing what you said. If you just focus on the journey, on the end result, getting someplace, you miss the joy of all the journey of the process.
Yeah,
So
I'd like to take credit for that. But there is a part that I can say that I didn't plagiarize or I could take credit for, but actually I saw this on the first of all, the epic movie Apollo 13, which was a real account. And
right,
the end of the movie, uh, they said they were characterized as a successful failure, and they didn't make it to the moon. But when I did more studies, and you look deep into that, and we've actually used that movie and we've taken it around and we've used it as a must watch to all of our offices, and we talked about it. But what was amazing is if you, they talk about, these are facts now, about all of the learning and all of the benefits that came out of and from the Apollo 13, I'm going to call it adventure, if you will, or the Apollo
right,
13 mission, and things that we enjoy today because of what they went through, because of the hardship, because of what the difficulty and of everything that occurred. We are able to enjoy breakthroughs and things in our lives today because of what happened, because everything didn't go right.
right,
And in fact, they never made it to the moon. And I remember Tom Hanks in the movie, he said, when the canister exploded, they were stirring the canister, and he said, "We just lost the moon. We're not going to make it to everything that we plan to do. The whole purpose of the mission, we're not going to see that come to reality yet. We're enjoying some of the greatest things that are medical advances, scientific advances, technology advances, all because of what they didn't, what
right.
they did
Yeah,
that."
I love that. I love that idea of you know, it's successful even though you don't complete the mission. Because if it had, when I interesting, my mother worked on a lot of those NASA projects. She worked on a lot of the back end, electronic kind of stuff. And so I was always very tuned in to every single launch for years, and that one particular. If everything had gone well, it would have just been another mission to the moon and back. We already did that, so it wasn't going to be
Mhm.
earth shattering or anything. But because of the failure and the successes that came out of the failure, like you said, we enjoy a lot. I'm pretty sure, I can't say this for a fact, but I'm relatively sure that a lot of what Elon Musk and his group is going through with their rockets and so on, as well as the Soviets, the Chinese, everyone else, uses the lessons learned from that failure, that mission failure, to be successful today. So how does that apply? Let's say, if you're either a business owner or you're a leader of any kind, and you've got a vision in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to hit these marks. We know where we're going. How does that sort of translate in everyday business practice?
What
Because
I've come
sometimes we can't get where we want to go.
Right. Yeah. What I've come to realize, especially in talking to people, and they love and rally around the many different stories that I've tell over my lifetime and journey. And the majority of the ones that people tend to rally around, Jim, has been those of where there was hardship, where there was difficulty, where we were in situations, and then I kind of liken it to, so you have different types of races. You have a marathon, you have sprint, but then you have this other one out there that people hopefully will get, and that's the hurdles, and that's the one where you just have to continue to jump over a hurdle. And so what's the next hurdle? What's the next hurdle? And it's not really so much of arriving, because you never really arrive, that I'm trying to get people to really rally around and to realize that you can enjoy the journey and the successes along the way, and not end up where so many people do. If they have a dream, they have an ideal, they want to be a certain size, there's something they want to attain. And it could be, for example, you want to, somebody could say, well, I want to climb Mount Everest. And so you don't make it to the zenith, you don't make it to the top. And so then they will look in the mirror at the end of their life and say, I'm a failure. And I say, absolutely not. It is all of the things on the way. And if you never make it to the zenith in the business, if you never make it, it is, if you could really understand, is that what is right before you, it is the getting through that, is the getting over that, that then you can begin to appreciate most people, and I think all of us, if we would take that mentality, then we would begin to enjoy life in a much more rich way than the disappointments oftentimes that people come to, I guess, face in their reality, where I never did this, I never did that. When you take a look back and look at all of the things that you overcome, all of the obstacles. So I would probably, in my world, describe failure as when you just don't attempt and you don't try. But success, we've seen success when you get back up, when you make an attempt, because there's something beneficial that you're going to get just out of purely trying and purely applying yourself to a problem that's in front of you. And most people don't see that.
Yeah. I remember one time, I know there's a lot of examples of this, but you and I were flying down to Dallas to go to some meetings together. And on the plane, you got a call and a text or something, and someone had stolen a truck or two truckloads of phones from one of your clients, or that were going to belong to your client. And I remember being on the plane with you, and you, in that moment, you learned, we're sitting there in the plane, you learned that you just lost, I think it was around $90,000 or something like that, tens of thousands of dollars. And I remember, I would have been out of my skin. I would have been yelling at somebody or something. And you were so calm, and you were just like, okay, well, we'll just have to deal with it. When we land, it's just going to take a loss. Just have to get through it. This stuff happens. And I remember sitting there going, golly, that's a lot of money to have to take a loss on. But if you're in the transportation business and you're moving stuff, I assume somebody's going to try to steal something at some point. That's the risk that you take. One of the things, someone said this to me years ago when we first started IOL, never measure success by where you're going. Always measure success by where you came from, and you'll get a better assessment. If you look back on your life, and this came at a time in my life where I really need to hear this because, I grew up in a housing project. I was an inner city kid, oldest kid of a single mom. My mother she had an 8th grade education, moved from the country to the city. The only place we lived in a little squalor apartment for a while. We finally got into a housing project. She got on government assistance and worked her way up to getting a great education, and worked on, lots of wonderful projects for the government and industry. But if you look back at where you came from, the things you've achieved look much different than if you keep looking out at the horizon, because you don't get to the horizon, right? You
Yeah.
can't get there.
And what I
Moving.
challenge people, and this is what I saw once again back in that great movie Apollo 13, and then I tried to internalize that in our business, is that as you go through these things, there's something, if I could take a look at success and that I've learned something and what you've learned, and I'm not talking about lessons learned, because people keep talking about lessons learned. I'm not talking about that, because typically that has a negative connotation. I'm talking about the fact that because something failed, because something didn't work the way that I wanted it to do. And in the case where you said there was a shipment that was compromised or stolen, we've had some in the millions.
I'm
And
sure. Yeah.
so we came out though learning things that if that had not happened, we would have never known. And I begin to, I'm not asking, this is not one of those statements that the beatings will continue until morale improves. So this is not one of the send me another, send me another. No, but in business and life, things are going to happen. And we can, if I can just get people to understand that you can measure, don't measure success on what you didn't attain or what you attained, or like there, which so many people do, or how much you've attained, but really the things that you go through that makes you who you are, that actually, in our case, in our business, made us better. I could even go so far as say, if that didn't happen, if that shipment wasn't compromised, if that employee didn't just walk out, we would not know what we now know.
Correct.
And it's not that you're asking for disaster. It's not that
Right.
you're planning or wanting or embracing disaster, but it's when the disaster comes, and it will come. So it's not if, it's when it comes that now I can take this and I can learn from it, but don't let that, which is exactly what Apollo 13, and I want to talk about finishing in a minute, but don't let that scenario, that objection, that challenge, that I would even say failure, that problem, that obstacle define what success is or stop you from continuing to pursue. Is different though, finishing, because in the case with Apollo 13, they say, well, we're not going to make it to the moon. But that didn't stop them, and this everybody needs to hear this. That didn't stop them from finishing or getting back home. If the key is to finish strong or to finish your race.
Yeah. I love that. I know that there's so many examples of that. I remember when I watched Apollo 13, the movie, went to the theater to watch it. So it was, very vivid,
Mm-hmm.
vivid in front of you. That whole idea of, it's almost like an onion peeling back the layers. You don't know what you don't know until something goes wrong. And then you realize, hey, we've got limited knowledge of this. We don't know what to do. They were really baffled. There was some very intense moments there. And I know it was a Hollywood reenactment, but I can't imagine the emotions of
Yeah.
being there thinking, yeah, I'm not going to make it home. We don't have enough oxygen. We're not going to we're not even going to get back, let alone finish the mission. So there's all of that emotion, which raises this issue. When I was watching, I was thinking about the times when I've just had you just get at a moment of despair where you're like, I don't even know why I'm going forward with this because stuff's not working. But if you take a different point of view and you peel back the onion, you peel back the layers of it and you look at it and then you learn, okay, we didn't know this. And the failure allowed us to peel that back and we could see now. We can see something we didn't see before. Vulnerability, weaknesses, systems that don't work just right. And I was able to translate that into my business work with clients, helping them peel it back. Things didn't go as planned, but how did they go?
Right. Right.
What did you learn from this? And how did you handle the experience? One of the things that um, maybe you can talk to this a little bit. After a while, you get tempered not to overreact.
Right.
At first, you're like, I'm
Yep.
we're all going to die. And
Yep.
then after you get more seasoned, you're laid back. You're like, okay, let's see what we can figure out from this. Talk a little bit about that, making that transition from, overwhelming, we're all going to die to being more stable, understanding with, a
Well,
little more patience.
I think it's really, which I like to challenge our audience to think about this. I'm going to go back to the movie first, and then I'll internalize it to my journey in our business and businesses, as you mentioned about things that we've had to face. But what was interesting in Apollo 13, they had all of these challenges, and there was literally life and death at stake here. And when that became a reality, the whole ideal of goal, the mission, the purpose, all of that went out the window. Think about
Right.
it. They
Gone.
said, and you got it, but here's the point that I think most people miss. I want to see if I can land that plane home. So the real goal, the most important one, was to get these people back home, to finish. And he said, we want to get these people. All of a sudden, everything got thrown out the window. And they said, whatever we have to face, what we got Houston, we got a problem. And so as they started working through all of this, the real goal was to finish. If I could get people to understand in business, the real goal is to finish strong. It's not to be the biggest of this or how much it can I mass, but to finish, whatever that is that God has given you, whatever He's poured inside of you, is to finish, to be true to, who you are, hopefully making a difference on this planet. That's the real goal. Now, let me bring that to what you said. How does that help temper me? So you said 90,000, and I'm not, I laughed when you said 90,000. I said, I wish it was only 90,000.
Well, I remember that was very early on.
Yeah.
After that,
and that becomes relative too, right? Because when you don't have much money, $90,000 is a lot of money. But we got to a point where we were moving shipments, and their value was $250,000, sometimes $500,000. And so we had one that was deep in the seven figures. And in fact, when I got the news that this occurred, and I don't want to just throw everything, but this occurred, it didn't move me as it would have earlier on in my career, even though it was absolutely shocking, intense. It was heavy. It was a heavy weight. Could have been the end of our organization, insurance wise, customer wise. But here's something that was quite interesting. And this is almost like the end of Apollo 13. They said, well, this is going to happen. This is going to happen when it comes through the atmosphere. It's going to blow up. And I just love this. I steal this all of the time. The other actor, I forget his name, he put on the jacket and he said, this is going to be our finest hour. This is going to be NASA's finest hour. Everybody, all the naysayers was talking about how bad things were, what's going on in your marriage, what's going on in your life, what's not happening in your business. He put on a jacket and said, this is going to be our finest hour. And I sort of adopted that. And I'm trying to get folks to understand that's why they were able to say this was a successful failure. For you to be able to know that you're facing something, and then to be able to put on your jacket and say, this is going to be your finest hour, to be able to, that it's now getting through, overcoming. And what happened, Jim, what happened with my staff, and I'll never forget it, when that happened over a weekend, and I was supposed to travel, and I got back to the office on a Monday, and here's what the staff said: we're so glad you're here. So it was the presence of someone that can just come in and say, not been there, done that, but that we're going to face this, and we're going to get through this. You may not know, we may not have all of the answers of the how. And that's what I like. Lastly, and another analogy I like to use, somebody once said that they were tied back during the heyday of Tiger Woods and Roger Federer. Tiger Woods was on the top of his game in golf, and Roger Federer was on the top of his game in tennis. And they said, we know they're going to win. And they said, don't you get tired of watching these guys, knowing that already what the outcome's going to be? And the commentator, I'll never forget what they said. They said, no, we don't get tired of watching them. We like seeing them get into trouble and then seeing how they're going to get out of it. And so that's success. That's what makes them memorable, or what we could say great, is when they get into these adverse situations that will happen. People are people. Technology fails. Things happen. Things don't work right. And so if people can now say is no longer the goal. I understand the goal is important, but the journey is where you can find the greatest amount of success of the things that you go through. And in fact, you may find out we're still here today talking about, to your point earlier, Apollo 13, a mission that never completed its task, but yet one of the greatest stories ever told. And
true.
And
I know in my work, in my academic work as a doctoral advisor and so on, you get these students. I used to, before I retired, get these students that spend years studying. They get to the research phase, which is that last hurdle you're talking about. It's a big one. It takes a couple years. You got to follow all the rules. You got to do everything that you're supposed to do. One of the hardest things for students to get over, and now these are all adults. These aren't children. These are grown adults, very successful, highly intelligent, well educated, very skilled. Yeah. Yeah, all of that. They got all of that. These are not novice. This isn't a person who just showed up one day. And what happens is they get to a place in the research, you submit your proposal and then you submit each section, and it has to be reviewed by a group of people. And in all my years, I never saw one go through that didn't just have massive revisions. Normally, the end of it never looks like the beginning of it, right? But what happens is if you explode on the front end, if you can't take input, if you can't take feedback, if you're if you're writing and you can't let someone edit it, you're done. Only about, I don't know what the stats are today, but before I retired, it was about 2% of all the students that got to that phase ever graduated. Now that's staggering to me. But one of the main reasons they never make it is because they get hung up on the fact that they can't learn from failure. You send in a 100-page document and it comes back all redlined and marked up, and people are
Right.
telling you you can't say that this way, you can't do it this way, and so on. When I was in school myself, I was also a teacher and I had a professor. I was at that place. I was going to throw in the towel. I had had it, too much politics, it's the whole thing. And my department head called me aside and he said, let me tell you something. Let me give you some advice here. This isn't about you. None of what's happening to you
Right.
is about you. You're basically irrelevant. This is about the university. It's about your family. It's about your calling from God. Well, he just pulled all of it out, like opened the cabinet and poured it out. He said, "You're the most insignificant part of the whole picture here. So you need to calm down and just go through the process because it isn't about you at all."
Right.
Hey,
Right.
and I went back to my office. I was kind of fuming, I felt sorry for myself. I don't know if I cried, but I felt like crying. What do you mean it's not? I thought it was all about
Right.
me. It's about me. He's like, nothing's about, this is not about you.
And that's the
So,
whole issue oftentimes that people, I think, miss in this whole context of leadership is really realizing, and that does relate to success, that as you're leading and if you're in leadership, if you're not able to face adversity, which will come. Because I noticed you had said something earlier, and you said these people are highly successful, and so you see a whole bunch of people highly successful until they face
until,
failure, and
right,
then when they face something, all of a sudden they go sideways, and because I'm not able to handle. And I'm not talking about the old constructive criticism where people say, "Can I be brutally honest?" I don't.
right, right,
No,
right,
you don't need to be brutal.
right. To be honest, you don't.
You could be honest and just give that in small bites because we can only take truth in small bites anyway. But no, you don't need to be brutally honest. But yet the issue is that I've seen in leadership, and then saying, well, when I look back at my career and going through even today with AI and other things that I'm still trying to learn and how things unfold, and I'm saying, well, that didn't work out, and so now I'm trying to learn from that differently from, well, that didn't work out and you just throw it away, or you're mad, or you're angry, or I failed. But you learn something, it teaches you something. It's almost like that old adage, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. So when I stumble, and I'll give a little secret to a couple of people. You mentioned about us moving goods. I remember early in my career, we had high valuable goods that we needed to move from point A to point B. So what do? You have high valuable goods that you need to move from point A to point B. You let everybody know these are high valuable goods.
Well,
Well, guess what? You let everybody know that these are high valuable goods, and those high valuable goods mysteriously never made it
Disappeared.
to the
Right.
where it was supposed to be. You were you were just letting the whole world know you got something that's very valuable. Here's where it's gonna be. And then at the end of the day, now this happened. This really did happen. We're shocked. What happened? And it took us just a couple of more times to realize that some of the problems that we were having in our supply chain were the actual people handling that. But had we not gone through that in our career, it would not have made us the company that we ultimately became, where people said, you're the one of the most trustworthy companies that we ever have done business with. So that, and as hard as that was for us at the time, as people will say, well, lessons learned. No, we were learning. So each time we fail, each time we fell down, we were learning not only how to fall less, but
Mhm.
then to get back up quicker. And then uh, it just made us, those failures made us a better company. Had we not had those failures, we would have never been a company that we were. And it's hard for me. And I know this is, it's kind of like my mother used to say, this dates us, is like, some people don't know what castor oil is, but just say medicine. It's medicine. It don't taste good, but it's good for you. So
Good
I'm
for
gonna
you.
give you, I'm giving people medicine. I know it don't taste good, but it's good for you. And it's,
Yeah.
I've concluded that there are certain things, thankfully, that had to happen, because if it didn't happen, I wouldn't be who I am today. Our
Yeah.
company has never been. It just made me a better person. It had to happen. And if you look at, if you could, everyone that's listening to us, if you could take the next thing that you face and say, this had to happen. And Jim, this is true. And I know I'm going on, but this is so
No, it's
important.
fine.
I remember, you know, I ride bikes and I cycle. And I remember when I got in an accident, and I was, when you say that, how do I approach life differently? I was on the ground with a broken hip, and I said, this was supposed to happen. Now, what I need to do is find out what good, what learning am I going to, what this happened not because you did something wrong, but there's going to be something that I can take away from this that's going to be beneficial. And to me, and I'm challenging everyone, when you do that, when you look at life through those lenses, you are a success. And here's one last point, and I know we've kind of gone over. People talk about retirement, and I said, and this goes back to the Apollo 13. And I said, retirement. So when there's a class I taught, and they laugh because I show them a tombstone. And a tombstone, I said, that's retirement. And until you're there, you have purpose, you have work. And so success, if we take the Apollo 13 model, success is really getting through life and doing it to the best of everything that you have and less of what you attain or amass. Come then to the end of your life, how so many people come to the end of their life, they're getting ready to draw their last breath, and they have all of these only, I wish I, and really, if we just stop them in their tracks and say, let's go back and take a look at where you started and to where you now, they probably have countless stories of success and things that they've overcome, but they just didn't look at it through those lenses.
They didn't see it. You know, from a very early age, and I'm not built for this, right? Being short and small of stature. But one of the things I love in athletics, I've always been a track and field junkie from early in life. It will go to the track and field meets, watch what happens, and being part of the team as a at different levels. But the one thing that used to really it really taught me early, and I've used it a number of times in class, you mentioned earlier is jumping hurdles, right? So it's one thing to run a race. Yeah, you got genetics, you got training, you got all that. But man, listen, the people that jump hurdles, that's crazy. That's amazing. And what is amazing about it is one day I'm at this track meet and it's the females running, these girls are running, and this girl hits the first hurdle and knocks it over, which, deducts points, right? But instead of crying about it, which is what happens a lot, especially at the collegiate level, she just kept on running, and she tipped another one. She touched another one. She touched it. She won the race, right?
Right.
So they just deducted off the points from the one she knocked over. But I've always remembered her. I don't know her name, but I remember, I can see her running in my head today. It's been many years ago. The first hurdle, she just slam dunked it, fell down, got up, kept going, touched the next one, touched it. But she ran. She didn't let one hurdle or two hurdles stop her from running, right?
Right. Yeah.
Now, when she got to the end, they deducted this and that. The trophy went to somebody else. That's fine. I always thought she was the winner because, these other people, they didn't have to overcome what she had to overcome. But it stuck with me because, just you're going to knock some hurdles over. Some things are going to knock you down, especially if you're in leadership. Let me tell you,
Yep.
you might as well get ready, put your helmet on because you're going to get whacked every direction.
There's so
So
much.
it's not that you're not going to go through things. You are.
Right.
It's how you're going to handle it
Yeah,
that
and
happens.
that point that I wanted to jump in, Jim, because I don't want to lose that point that you just illustrated there, because it kind of gets lost, I think, in not only our reality, but when people think about it, and you use the sports as a analogy, in reality too. We know that we have, when you look back at some of the great sports figures, and you got the Hussein Bolts, maybe you have the Carl Lewis's, and maybe other names. These guys just ran. They were just unbelievably fast. They won. They won. They won. But the stories that are told even beyond that, that people. So we'll say this person, they ran the greatest, fastest time ever, and then it's kind of just gone. But the story that doesn't leave is a person, and you mentioned the hurdle, and I'm reminded of, there was a race and the person stumbled and they fell and they couldn't finish on their own.
I remember that.
That's right. Some of the other people came around and they grabbed them, and then they helped the person just get. And that's where I'm getting back to the finish line. That's what I'm trying to get everyone to understand. That story rallies more people, and here's the point that I was trying to get people to understand in the success order. The majority of the people on the planet will identify more with that story than breaking the world record, because the majority of us are going to have those experiences, and we have those experiences. And the thing that we don't really give much credit to is we don't know about 10,000 hour rule, about all of the thousands of hours that the person went through to break that world record, how many hamstrings was pulled, or sicknesses and things that they overcome, and all the discipline just to break the world record. So I'm saying, fine, since that is such a small percentage of our experience,
Correct.
is
That's not, most of us are not.
yeah, don't let's stop using the world record as success and use finishing as success. And if we could just rally, you rally yourself or you rally other people, then your whole life will change, because now my goal is no longer how big of a company, and I understand the goals and those things are important, but I don't measure my success of if I attained it. I take a look more closely at the things that I go through and that I face, that actually are there to help me get there, and in some cases may even surpass where I'm trying to go to.
Correct.
And that's where
Yeah.
I'm to get people to understand in business.
Yeah. In this blog that you did, the other thing, which we've been touching on, but I want to cycle back to this for a second. This idea of satisfaction, getting your joy, your fulfillment, your edification out of what you're going through, not just the end result. I'm going to give you an example. So I've been playing music my whole life since I was 12. That's when I had my first professional gig, you might say. So one time I was on the road touring with a band, and we were in Jackson, Mississippi. And I had been, I was a drummer, a percussionist, but I also played bass as well. So the bass player quit. We were in the middle of a tour. He had some issue at home and he left. And the guy who owned the group came up to me and he handed me a bass guitar. He said, we got 5 days until we get to Jackson, Mississippi. It's going to be about 7,000 people. and I need you to learn all these songs. We should just hire a bass player. He said, we don't have time for that. You're it. This is you. So, I worked hard, tried to learn everything I could, scared to death. So I'm sitting on the stage with, it's a piano, a big grand piano, Steinway, and me on a stool with a bass guitar and 4 singers. That's the picture. 1,000 people in the audience, and the curtain's closed, and the curtain opens, and these people are clapping, uh, and the singers come out, and there's like standing ovation. Nobody's done anything yet, right? I'm just sitting back there waiting. The piano player starts to play. When he pushed the pedal down, the bar fell down and rolled across the stage in front of me.
Right.
The sustain pedal. And then another thing fell down and rolled up across the stage. And he looked at me and he said, "It's on you." It's on you. And the singers are standing there. And so I hit the first note. I remember it was a B flat. I know that. And I hit that note because he couldn't do anything, right?
Right.
The piano was just falling apart. And so I just played my part, and he did a little bit that he could do. And no one saw what happened. The audience couldn't see it. They thought this is the way it was arranged. It was a bass guitar, very minimal, and a cappella. And it was a standing ovation.
Yeah.
It was a standing ovation. I'm going to fast forward a couple years later. I'm on a different tour with a different group. And this guy playing guitar, I'm back on drums, thankfully. And this guy's playing the lead guitar, and the string breaks. The E string, the high E, breaks. He don't care. He just keeps playing. Then the B string breaks. The next string, ding. He don't care. He just adjusted himself to keep on playing. And then a third string broke. And I'm watching this guy. I'm like, we're going to quit any moment now. No, he just adjusted himself to playing on 3 strings.
Right.
So he had a 6-string guitar with 3 strings. No one ever knew any different, right?
Right.
No one ever did. We did the song. It went great. People applauded, had a great time. He turned around and looked at me. He goes, "That's how you do it.
Yeah.
That's the way you do it." Right? Stuff's going to happen. Things going to break. But the reason I'm telling those 2 stories is now that I play, and I'm older now, still playing music, nothing much bothers me.
Right.
On stage, stuff happens, don't work, whatever. After a while, and so someone that I'm playing with recently said, "Man, you are the coolest person I've ever seen. Stuff happens and you don't even blink." And I'm like, well, I was thinking back, why is that? Well, it's not a lot that you can do that I haven't seen go bad.
Right.
But it tempers you after a while. Now, you can cry about it. You can complain about it. You could scream at the producer about it. You could scream at the piano guy if you want to, but it's not going to do any good. What you can do is you can learn from it. It'll temper you in a positive way.
Oh, in this context, there's so many different definitions out there regarding success, and I probably have 2 or 3. But if I certainly had to land on one, and I certainly think that in the context of business, marriage, life, it's just not quitting. So I'm going to say for everyone listening, success is not quitting, and I'll do it because anybody can quit. Anybody can quit. Easy is the adversary of advancement and getting things done. And I remember this is the precursor to Apollo 13. And it was by John F. Kennedy. And here's what he said. And I love it. He said, we're going to I heard it one time. I said, that is profound. We're going to the moon, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. I said, man, I wish I came up with that. That is so profound. And people and the advancements, the things that we have in life, the achievements, because somebody said, listen, I'm going to do this not because it's easy, but because it's hard. Now, I want to bring this lastly to something I stumbled upon in the same context, Jim, and to the audience, so they don't think, well, you just saying that. But I remember in our early years of our logistics business, when we were competing with the Federal Expresses and UPSs and all those other guys. And so I said, well, what can I do to get me an advantage to going to these customers? And it took me a little bit of time to figure out, well, how can somebody as small as I am in comparison to their size compete, get the opportunity to go into a customer and even let them entertain doing business with me. And so I would come in with, who am I? You just this nobody. We don't even know who you are. And here was my hook. I went in and I said, "Give me what nobody else wants.
Yeah,
Give
I
me the
remember.
hardest thing you have that nobody else wants to do or everybody else has failed at, and and here's what I told them. And this is marketing. This is sales 101. These are freebies that everybody's getting. And I said, not to trial and error, because if there's trial and error, that means you could pass or fail. So I said, I use the word, and everything's a lot of this is in the words, so we can demonstrate. So there's a difference between try us as if I'm going to fail
Right.
versus let me demonstrate what we
Yep.
can do. But
Let
I
me
went
show
in,
you how good I can be.
yeah, and I said, give me the hardest thing you got. And that opened so many doors to us. And they even came back and said, well, yeah, everybody wants the easy thing. Who doesn't want the easy thing? So
Right.
that's the
Right.
human
The
nature,
easy money.
easy thing. But I found out in business, I found out in marriage, I found out in life that nothing's easy. It is hard. And so, to your point, when you use the analogy about you've seen this before, while it may not be the exact scenario, no, I've seen this same saying, I've seen this before. I've seen theft. You've seen this. You've seen people walk out. You've seen people not return phone calls, not show up. And it gets you to not where you are so used to it that you embrace it, but it doesn't move you or it doesn't shatter you. Actually, you say, because many, many other people will collapse under that. Now you can be the last man standing, and
Yeah.
that's what people rally around.
Yeah. That's great. I mean, I could think of 1,000 things to comment on that. I want to, I want to close up with something that happened. This is a real life situation that happened. Uh, I think it was last year or year before last. I can't remember. Anyway, I was in Florida. I was with you down in Florida, and you had a business that was down there, a small business, and a good business. It was doing well. It was fulfilling what it was designed to do. While you and I were together, you said, I think it's time to sell this business. Either sell it or close it up. It's done what it's supposed to do. And so it's time to make a change. And it was pretty interesting because we were working together on some things, and this was kind of on the side. This wasn't what we were working on, something else together. And so I'm watching this little scenario going on in your life over here, and you're trying to figure out, can we sell it? What's the value? Do we just shut it down, call it a day? What it is? And it was good for me just to watch you go through that. Not that, I wasn't relishing the fact that you were doing it, but you were able to just take it in stride, figure out what to do. It worked out in order to sell it to the employees or something. But it was just that whole journey of going through that, watching you kind of over here. Talk just a little bit at the end here, having to close something up, having to shut something down, having to transition something. That's not the end. It's not the end of it. It's just the next phase of it.
No,
Maybe we could talk a little bit about that.
it's funny that you mentioned this because so there's a couple of, I'm just going to do two things. First of all, it wasn't what you described it when you said, "Oh, it's doing all this stuff," and that's important to state. You didn't know that. It goes back to the old commentary of it. I think it was a commercial, and it said, "Never let them see you sweat." And
Okay.
so in business and things, there's not necessarily a front, but a persona and just how we're to manage. You really, and even you, I don't know what you're going through right now, and other folks. It really should not in business. People should not. It should not be all over our faces of the things that we're facing.
Mhm. Right.
But the point that I think you are pulling out of me, even as I think about it, is was really simply this: the business did not, and it was not achieving its goals,
Okay.
but it did serve its purpose.
Okay. Yeah, that's the difference.
See? And so because if it was making all this money hand over fist, like people say, then why would you sell it, et cetera, et
Right.
cetera?
Right.
And
Good point.
so, but it achieved its purpose. So that is not a corrective, but we knew that it achieved its purpose. It lived its tenure in its life up to a point, and we said, okay, now we know what works, what don't work, who's working, who's not working. Does this fit? Does this not fit? Do we want it? So it served its purpose. It answered questions both positively and it answered the negative, which you need to know, but you wouldn't have not have known had you not gone through it. And then a wonderful thing, lastly, that I wanted to share with everyone in the audience. So the great success that we came to realize out of this after going all through this process, and then we we came up with our own conclusions of here was going to be the exit strategy. But then the real success of the story is as we were knocking on doors trying to figure out what the exit strategy was, and this gets back into the how. So not throwing in the towel, not quitting. It just so happened that one of the staff members of the organization, and this happened to us a number of times, said, you know what? I want this organization. It's amazing, Jim, and our audience, where people, when you walk through this in that regard, purpose, people can see things that you can't see. And then now you're able to help them be successful. And I can sit here back and say, this is a wonderful, this is a wonderful journey. It took us to a point, and now you help someone else become success, and that's success for me. That is
Yeah,
a
I love it.
great, if people could say, well, if I'm just the greatest enabler, if I'm just here to help other people achieve and move obstacles, help them jump through the hurdles. It's the runner that we talked about. They
Hmm.
couldn't make it. So you go and you wrap your arms around them, you help them get through. You're successful because even if you didn't reach your goal, you're successful because you've helped someone else. And you will find everyone who does this will find in their life that their life is more rich helping other people succeed than even their own so-called success and what they get.
No, I agree. I agree. Back in the 1970s, I took uh, Hoyt's Wagner spiritual gifts assessment, and it came up. It said, "Well, your number one gift is teaching. Your second most important gift is helps." And I remember, like,
Right.
what is that? I'm on the road to success here. I'm going to achieve things. I had goals and visions and helping other people. And that didn't make any sense to me at all. And I kind of argued with the person doing the inventory. I kept taking it over and over, trying to get it to come out differently, and it didn't. And then I ended up spending most of my life helping other people. And I think you're right. It's not your personal success. It's the success of the people around you that you help. And
Yeah.
now I'm surrounded by
Yeah.
lots of wonderful people that I've helped. My success is more about them. That's the real success. Well, it's great to have you on here. And I think we'll do another one of these and dive into, want to get on here and talk about impossible business solutions, which is a project we're working on together. I want to get on and talk some more about what you're doing in some of the other areas of leadership now that you're freed up, not retired, just freed up from.
As long as I have breath, Joe, there's work to do. And I tell people that the last day you go to work will be the day that you die, and
Yeah.
that should be it. But let me give. I know we're past time, and I just
Oh,
want to drop this one thing that you mentioned on success, and that is and this is especially for business leaders and even and I would say just all in life because people look at my wife and they say, Glenn, that's a best sales job you ever did. And I tell them the only reason why if for every great man there's a woman behind him. But I say, well, the only reason why my wife is behind me is because she lapped me.
right.
But if the business leaders and us who lead and entrepreneurs would just take this one principle of success, and that is, and I've heard other people say it, but to your point, we've heard it before, but we don't really put it to practice. And that is move the threats aside, but you will be great when you find people that are better than you and surround people better than you in your organization instead of being threatened by them. And people are going to say, man, that person really got it going on. And most people don't do that. The successful shows in Las Vegas and some of these people that have gone on, they tell us it's real simple. I just find guests and other people who are experts and better than I, and all of a sudden they're getting all of the all of the glory.
True.
So
Yeah. And if you learn to appreciate and revel in the success of other people, I tell you, it's a great thing to watch. I know maybe that I'm older now, but watching these young people come up, they're so smart, they're intuitive, they've got tools and technology that we never had. You and I were from the dark ages where you had, wooden hammers and all of that. And these guys are so smart. They got the whole world ahead of them. And I love the fact that, they're being successful. But it is great to be able to look at the success of others, surround yourself with good people, and enjoy their success. That's what's wonderful. Well, we'll come back to this. We're going to come back. Glenn Henderson, a good friend, good brother in the Lord. It's great to have you on here, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Jim, it's been good here being with you. We'll talk about impossible business solutions next time we're together.
Coming up, Impossible Business Solutions. Watch for it.